Perfume has always been more than just a pleasant fragrance. For thousands of years, humans have reached for smells that promised allure, power, status, or even spiritual protection. Today, when we imagine perfume, we think of sweet floral blends or fresh citrusy notes sealed in elegant glass bottles. But history tells a far stranger story. Long before modern chemistry and sleek branding, people across cultures experimented with ingredients that now seem shocking, even unsettling. Perfume wasn't only about smelling good. It was often tied to medicine, ritual, or magic. Ancient civilizations used whatever nature, animals, and human bodies offered. Scents came from rare resins traded along dusty roads, but they also came from unexpected corners: sweat, bodily fluids, animal waste, or even decomposed matter. To our modern senses, some of these concoctions might seem downright revolting, yet in their own times, they were valued as precious and even divine. In this journey, we'll travel across the ages to uncover the weirdest ingredients that once wafted through royal courts, temples, and boudoirs. Each section will peel back a layer of olfactory history, revealing how people chased beauty through bizarre means, and why even the strangest smells carried deep meaning. So take a deep breath, though perhaps hold it for some of these tales, as we explore the uncanny, the curious, and the downright unsettling world of perfume's past. Section 1. The fragrance of sweat, ancient Greece, and the allure of athletes. In the modern world, sweat is usually something we scrub away. Deodorants and perfumes exist largely to cover or neutralize its sharp scent. But in the ancient Greek world, sweat could be bottled and treasured as a perfume. It sounds bizarre, but to the Greeks, the sweat of athletes was considered a potent mixture of health, strength, and even design vitality. The practice revolved around a substance known as gloios. After athletes competed in the gymnasia or arenas, attendants would scrape their skin with curved tools called strigils. These scrapers collected a mixture of olive oil, dust, and sweat. Instead of throwing this gunk away, the residue was gathered, sometimes stored in small vessels, and sold as a prized substance. To many, gloios carried the essence of athletic vigor and masculine beauty. Why would anyone desire this? In Greek culture, athletes weren't just admired for their physical abilities, they were cultural icons. Their bodies were sculpted into statues, their victories immortalized in poetry, and their very sweat was believed to hold curative or magical properties. Physicians and philosophers argued that the excretions of the human body, when coming from the strong and the noble, contained vital energies. Gloios could be rubbed on the skin as a protective ointment or even ingested as a form of medicine. Some whispered it had the power to heal ailments or transfer the strength of champions to ordinary men. The idea of sweat as perfume also ties into the Greeks' view of scent itself. To them, smells weren't just superficial. They were deeply linked to health, the soul, and the gods. Fragrance was believed to travel directly to the brain, bypassing ordinary senses, and thus had divine or mystical significance. Smelling the sweat of an athlete was, in some sense, like inhaling the very essence of heroism. In temples and rituals, perfumed oils often played a role in purification and connection with the divine. But here, too, sweat entered the scene. Athletes trained and competed in the nude, their bodies glistening with oil. The mixture of oil and perspiration became almost ritualistic in itself, merging human effort with the sheen of divinity. To some, To smell the sweat of a champion was to be near the gods. Of course, not everyone was enchanted. Critics of the practice pointed out the obvious. Gloyos didn't exactly smell like roses. It was earthy, pungent, and lusky. Yet the fact that it was unpleasant by modern standards didn't reduce its value. Much like today's expensive niche perfumes that intentionally embrace animalic or musky notes, the Greeks found a lure in what we might dismiss as repulsive. The trade of gloyos wasn't small-scale either. Wealthy patrons, collectors, and even healers sought it out. Certain athletes, especially Olympic victors, were rumored to have their sweat sold at high prices, making it a commodity of celebrity culture. In a way, it was no different from how fans today might pay extraordinary amounts for a lock of hair, a signed jersey, or even shoes worn during a famous game. Only in this case, it was bottled sweat. Interestingly, this practice wasn't entirely isolated to Greece. Romans, who adopted and adapted many Greek customs, also valued the oils of athletes. But in Rome, perfumes became more elaborate and luxurious, often blending the bizarre with exotic spices from across the empire. Gloyos, however, retained its aura of purity and strength, a reminder of the gritty yet celebrated physical culture of the Greeks. Looking back, it's tempting to dismiss this as nothing more than ancient eccentricity. But there's a broader lesson here. What people find desirable in fragrance often reflects their values. To the Greeks, sweat represented vitality, health, and heroic energy. Today, perfumes may promise youth, elegance, or sensuality, but the underlying concept is the same: bottling an idea and wearing it on the skin. So the next time you dab on cologne or spray perfume before leaving the house, consider the oddity of human history. Once upon a time, a jar of an athlete's sweat might have been the ultimate status symbol, the scent of triumph itself. Section 2. The Ocean Secret. Ambergris, the luxury perfume ingredient born from whales. If the sweat of athletes might strike you as odd, the next strange perfume ingredient will likely leave you even more astonished. For centuries, one of the most expensive and sought-after ingredients in the perfume industry wasn't a delicate flower or exotic spice. It was something far stranger: ambergris, a substance produced in the guts of sperm whales. Often described, perhaps unkindly, as whale vomit, ambergris is one of those natural phenomena that seems too strange to be true. It begins as a waxy secretion in the intestines of sperm whales. These whales dine heavily on squid, whose sharp beaks can irritate the whale's digestive system. To protect itself, the whale produces a sticky substance that encases the beaks, helping them pass more smoothly through the body. Sometimes, this mass is expelled into the ocean, where it floats for years, even decades. The saltwater, sun, and air slowly transform the unpleasant lump into a smooth, waxy material with a surprisingly pleasant smell. Fresh ambergris is said to be pungent and fecal, hardly the stuff of luxury. But aged ambergris develops a complex aroma: earthy, sweet, musky, and marine all at once. It is this transformation, something born from the inner workings of a whale's gut evolving into an almost magical fragrance, that fascinated perfumers across centuries. Ambergris first appeared in ancient texts from the Middle East and Asia. In China, it was burned like incense. In Arabic traditions, it was mixed into luxurious oils and ointments. By the medieval period, ambergris had reached Europe, where it became associated with nobility and extravagance. Monarchs and aristocrats used it not only as a perfume fixative, but also as a flavoring in food. Believe it or not, some feasts in medieval Europe featured dishes spiced with grated ambergris, a reminder that the boundary between scent and taste was not as strict as it is today. What made ambergris especially valuable was its role as a fixative in perfume. Unlike many natural scents that fade quickly, ambergris could preserve and enhance fragrances, making them last much longer on the skin. It blended beautifully with floral and herbal notes, softening sharp edges and creating depth. To a perfumer, it was like liquid gold, a rare ingredient that could elevate a simple fragrance into something extraordinary. But its scarcity made it even more mysterious. Since ambergris could only be found washed up on beaches, it was unpredictable and incredibly rare. Entire fortunes were spent to obtain it. A single chunk, weighing several pounds, might fund a noble household for a year. Imagine strolling along a shoreline and stumbling upon what looked like a lump of hardened wax, only to realize it was worth more than gold. For some lucky beachcombers, ambergris was truly the ocean's treasure. The fascination with ambergris wasn't only about perfume. People believed it had medicinal properties too. Apothecaries sold it as a cure for headaches, colds, and even heart palpitations. Some claimed it was an aphrodisiac, stirring passion with its warm, animal-like scent. Others saw it as spiritually powerful, a material that carried the mystery of the sea and the majesty of whales. Kings and sultans wore it in amulets, believing it could protect against poison or bad luck. Ambergris even made its way into literature. Shakespeare referenced it, calling it a most exquisite perfume. Herman Melville, in Moby Dick, described it vividly, marveling at its unlikely transformation from foul to fragrant. Writers used ambergris as a symbol of luxury, mystery, and the strange gifts of nature. The paradox of ambergris, its humble, even grotesque origin versus its exalted place in perfumery, makes it one of history's most bizarre perfume ingredients. It raises questions about human imagination. Who first thought to pick up a lump of whale excretion and decide it could be valuable? Perhaps curiosity, perhaps desperation, or perhaps simply the timeless human drive to capture and wear beauty, no matter how unlikely the source. In modern times, ambergris has largely disappeared from mainstream perfumery. Ethical and environmental concerns, along with the development of synthetic alternatives, have made it rare and controversial. Synthetic substitutes, such as ambroxide, mimic its rich, musky qualities without involving whales. Yet true ambergris, when it appears on the market, still commands astonishing prices. Perfumers treasure it as irreplaceable, nature's oddest, most luxurious secret. Ambergris teaches us something profound about the history of fragrance. Perfume is not always about what smells pleasant at first sniff. It is about transformation. Just as raw ambergris must age and mellow to reveal its beauty, perfume often takes unpleasant origins and refines them into elegance. In this way, ambergris is the perfect metaphor. Out of the whale's belly came one of the world's greatest perfumes. Next time you walk by the sea, consider this. Beneath the waves, whales may still be producing one of history's strangest treasures. And somewhere, even now, a lump of ambergris might be drifting on the tide, waiting to perfume the world again. Section 3. Musk, the hidden scent of animal glands. When we think of perfume today, we imagine sweetness, flowers, or perhaps the crisp scent of citrus. But for much of history, one of the most important and beloved fragrance ingredients did not come from a plant at all. It came from the secret glands of animals. This strange, intimate substance is called musk, and it shaped the world of perfumery for centuries. The word musk originally referred to a strong-smelling secretion from the musk deer, a shy, delicate animal living in the forests and mountains of Asia. Male musk deer possess a small gland near the belly, just in front of the genitals. Inside this gland is a reddish-brown paste that to modern noses smells pungent, earthy, and almost urinous in its raw form. Yet when dried and carefully prepared, it transforms into something remarkable, a warm, sensual, almost skin-like scent that lingers far longer than most other natural perfumes. In ancient India and Tibet, musk was considered sacred. Buddhist monks burned it as incense, believing the rising smoke could calm the mind during meditation. In Ayurvedic medicine, it was prescribed as a tonic for the heart, nerves, and even fertility. The paradox of musk fascinated people. How could something so animal, so bodily, carry such spiritual weight? Perhaps that was its power. It connected the human soul to both earth and heaven. From India, musk traveled westward along the Silk Road. By the time it reached Persia and Arabia, it was already worth its weight in gold. Caliphs and sultans prized musk as the height of luxury. It was sprinkled into clothing chests, blended into oils, and used to scent mosques. The Islamic Golden Age produced some of the most elaborate perfumes the world has ever known, many of them anchored by musk. Writers of the time spoke of musk as if it were a jewel, a hidden treasure from the body of a mysterious creature. Europe encountered musk during the Middle Ages, and it quickly became the most fashionable scent in courts and palaces. Medieval ladies carried pomanders, small ornate containers filled with fragrant materials, to protect against bad smells and disease. Musk was often the star ingredient, believed not only to delight the senses, but also to guard against the miasmas of plague. Doctors wore musk-soaked masks during outbreaks, hoping the rich scent would shield them from illness. What made musk truly extraordinary was its ability to blend with other scents. Perfumers discovered that even a tiny pinch of musk could transform a mixture of herbs or flowers, giving the fragrance depth, warmth, and longevity. Without musk, many perfumes would fade within minutes. With musk, they could last for hours, even days, gently releasing their aroma. It became the soul of perfume, invisible yet indispensable. But there was always a darker side to musk. To obtain it, the musk deer had to be killed and the gland cut from its body. As demand grew, musk deer populations were hunted nearly to extinction in some regions. By the 17th century, natural musk was so rare and costly that it was reserved for the wealthiest elites. One tiny vial could sell for more than a year's wages for a laborer. Other animals also contributed their own versions of musk. Beavers in North America produced castoreum, a similar substance from their scent glands, once used in both perfumes and medicines. Civet cats, small nocturnal mammals, secreted a musky fluid from their anal glands. Even the humble muskrat lent its name to the family of smells, though its contribution was less glamorous. Each animal's secretion carried the same principle: strange, bodily, sometimes unpleasant in raw form, but capable of becoming captivating once transformed by the art of perfumery. Writers and poets often used musk as a metaphor for hidden passion. To wear musk was to carry something primal, something that stirred desire. Some compared it to the smell of skin itself, human warmth captured in scent. In Renaissance Europe, musk was whispered about as an aphrodisiac, and perhaps it truly had that effect, not chemically, but through the imagination it sparked. Over time, Musk became so important that perfumers sought ways to reproduce it without killing animals. By the late 19th century, chemists developed synthetic musks, molecules designed to mimic the warmth and depth of natural musk. These synthetics allowed perfumes to become more affordable and more widely available. They also saved countless animals from being hunted for their glands. Yet many perfumers still insisted that nothing could quite replace the richness of true natural musk. Today, natural musk is almost entirely banned due to conservation laws, but its legacy remains everywhere in modern perfumery. Most fragrances we know, whether floral, woody, or spicy, are built upon synthetic musks that provide longevity and body, even if you don't realize it. Musk is probably part of the perfume you wear or the soap you use. What makes musk one of the weirdest perfume ingredients in history is not just its origin, but its transformation. From a pungent secretion hidden in the belly of a deer, it became the heartbeat of perfumery. From temples to palaces, from medicine to luxury, it traveled across continents and centuries. Musk shows us that beauty often begins in unexpected places, and that humans have always sought to capture the essence of life itself, even when it meant reaching into the secret glands of animals. As we think about musk today, we might marvel at the imagination of those who first dared to collect it. They took something raw and strange, and through patience and artistry, turned it into a symbol of refinement. Musk is both a reminder of our closeness to the animal world and a testament to human creativity in the pursuit of fragrance. Section 4. Crushed insects and tiny creatures. Perfume from the smallest sources. When most people imagine perfume, they think of petals gently pressed or herbs steeped in oils. Rarely do they imagine something crawling, buzzing, or wriggling. Yet for centuries, one of the strangest sources of fragrance came from the smallest of creatures, insects. To modern minds, the idea may sound unsettling, but in the history of perfume, tiny animals were not only used, but treasured. The most famous insect ingredient in scent is the cochineal, a small red bug that feeds on cactus plants in the deserts of Central and South America. Cochineal is best known today as a dye, the source of brilliant crimson and scarlet colors in clothing and art. But beyond its vibrant pigment, cochineal also carried a faint, sweet odor. When dried and crushed, it could be blended into balms or tinctures. Some early recipes describe it as adding a delicate warmth to perfumes, softening the sharpness of resins or herbs. But cochineal was not the only insect involved in perfumery. The Spanish fly, or cantharides, was another. This beetle was infamous as an aphrodisiac, though its reputation was more dangerous than deserved. Ground into powder, it produced a sharp, pungent smell. Apothecaries sometimes added it to oils and ointments, not just for fragrance, but because it was believed to stimulate the body, even to stir passion. Of course, in reality, it was highly toxic. Yet the association between the beetle's powder and sensuality made it part of perfumed lore, whispered about more than openly worn. In ancient Egypt, insects had an important symbolic role, and sometimes their bodies were included in perfumed ointments burned during rituals. The scarab beetle, though not crushed for scent, was linked to rebirth and transformation. Some scholars suggest that insect shells were ground and mixed with resins to add a faint, musky edge to ceremonial fragrances. It was not the sweetness of flowers that mattered here, but the symbolism, a sense that even the smallest life could carry power when offered to the gods. Then there were the honeybees, not for their bodies, but for the wax and honey they produced. Beeswax was a staple in ancient balms and perfumes, holding together oils and powdered ingredients. But some records hint that crushed bees were occasionally mixed into ointments, believed to carry medicinal or magical strength. Imagine a Roman woman anointing her skin with a balm that carried the faint sweetness of honey, and perhaps the essence of bees themselves. Why would people turn to insects for perfume at all? Part of the answer lies in availability. Insects were everywhere. They were easy to collect, dry, and grind. And in cultures where symbolism mattered, insects represented transformation, vitality, or passion. To wear them as scent was to capture not just their odor, but their essence. Another part of the answer lies in experimentation. Ancient perfumers tried everything, from plants to stones to animal secretions. Insects were simply another ingredient to test, another mystery to unlock. The association between insects and perfume continued in subtle ways into later centuries. In Renaissance Europe, cochineal was prized as a dye, but perfumers also experimented with it in pomanders and sachets. Travelers returning from the New World brought tales of red powders and strange scents, blending the exotic bug into European fragrance traditions. Some recipes from the 16th century combine cochineal with rose oil, musk, and amber, creating perfumes that would have seemed both familiar and otherworldly. The idea of crushed insects in perfume may seem repellent today. Yet it reminds us of how deeply ancient cultures engaged with the natural world. Nothing was dismissed outright. If something had a smell, pleasant, strange, or powerful, it was considered worth exploring. This curiosity, sometimes reckless, led to discoveries that shaped perfumery as we know it. Even now, the use of insect-derived ingredients lingers in cosmetics and dyes, though often hidden behind scientific names. One might wonder what these insect-based perfumes actually smelled like. Accounts are rare, but the descriptions suggest that the scents were not delicate or floral. Instead, they were earthy, musky, sometimes sharp. The goal was not always to please, but to impress, to carry a sense of vitality, strength, or magic. A Roman gladiator might anoint himself with oil mixed with strong-smelling powders, believing it gave him courage. A noblewoman might wear a pomander filled with musk and insect powder, convinced it guarded her against disease. Perfume, in these cases, was more than decoration. It was a form of protection, a spell in liquid form, and the insects contributed their share of mystery. Perhaps the thought of wearing crushed beetles or powdered cochineal would repel us today. But for those who lived centuries ago, it was not the origin that mattered, but the effect, the transformation of the ordinary into something extraordinary. This use of insects teaches us another truth about the history of perfume, that beauty is often subjective. What seems bizarre or even disgusting to one generation can be luxurious to another. Just as whale excretions became treasures, so too did the powder of bugs become symbols of wealth and power. The smallest creatures in nature found their way into the grandest courts, carried on the skin of queens, kings, and priests. As unsettling as it may sound, the buzzing world of insects left its mark on perfume. Tiny bodies, transformed by fire, powder, or oil, became part of humanity's endless quest to capture scent. And in their way, these creatures remind us that history's perfumes were never simple, never limited to roses or violets, but drawn from every corner of nature, no matter how unexpected. Section 5. Perfume of Ashes, Smoke, Hair, and the Scent of Ritual. When we think of perfume today, we imagine soft, bottled liquids, something to spray onto the wrist or the neck, something designed to make us smell attractive or elegant. But in the deep past, perfume was not only about beauty, it was also about the divine, the mysterious, and sometimes the macabre. Few things capture this better than the ancient practice of using ashes and burned matter, including hair, bones, and other substances we would never dream of today, in perfumes and rituals. Let's start with the connection between ashes and sacred smoke. In ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Rome, one of the most common ways to wear perfume was not by dagging it on the body, but by inhaling it as it rose in fragrant smoke. Incense was everywhere, and with it came the use of ashes. Priests and priestesses would burn resins like frankincense or myrrh. But these were not always enough. To strengthen the spiritual presence of the smoke, other substances were sometimes added. Among them were dried plants, animal bones, and, most unsettling of all, hair. Yes, human hair. In several cultures, including some Roman funerary traditions, burning hair was considered a way to release the essence of a person into the air. The smell was acrid and unpleasant, but the meaning was profound. By burning a lock of hair and letting its smoke mingle with resins, people believed they were sending a soul upward, carrying prayers to the gods. In this sense, perfume was not about pleasing the nose. It was about guiding the spirit, about turning something ordinary, the physical remnants of the body, into a bridge to the divine. The Romans were not the only ones who thought of ashes as perfumed offerings. In ancient India, certain Vedic rituals used ashes of plants and even animal substances as part of sacred incense. The idea was that ashes contained the purified essence of what once lived, stripped of the material body. To burn them was to return them to the gods, carried upward in columns of smoke. There are also records from medieval Europe of people adding ashes of aromatic wood, spices, and even feathers into perfume blends. The ashes were ground into fine powders, then mixed with oils to create scented balms or dry sachets. In some alchemical recipes, ashes symbolized transformation, the breaking down of one state into another. To wear a balm containing ashes was to wear change itself, a strange perfume of destruction and rebirth. Hair, in particular, carried special symbolism. A person's hair was often seen as a vessel of life, a piece of them that could live on even when cut. Burning hair in perfumes was thought to release not just scent, but power. Some love charms involved mixing a strand of hair into incense, so that when it burned, the desired person would be bound closer to you. Imagine standing in a Roman household, the air heavy with the perfume of resins, only to catch a sharp, unmistakable edge, that of hair crackling in the brazier. To us, it would seem ghastly. To them, it was magical. This connection between perfume and the body grew even more dramatic in certain ritual practices. Among some ancient Egyptian funerary rites, perfumes were blended with ashes of sacred animals, cats, ibises, or bulls, whose bodies had been offered in sacrifice. The perfume was not intended for daily wear, but for ceremonies honoring the dead or the gods. The scent was meant to carry the spirit of the animal upward, binding it into the divine order. Another fascinating example comes from medieval perfumers experimenting with bone ash. Alchemists believed that by grinding bones into ash and mixing them with rose oil or resin, it could create a perfume that captured both life and death. Some even claimed it could protect against illness, acting as a kind of olfactory shield. Though the smell would have been strange, earthy, smoky, and unsettling, the symbolism was powerful. Why did people turn to such eerie ingredients? The answer lies in how they understood perfume itself. For much of history, perfume was not just cosmetic, it was sacred. The rising of smoke symbolized the rising of prayers, the connection between human beings and the unseen. Ashes and burned matter carried a sense of transformation. Something solid was turned into something invisible. Something earthly was lifted skyward. In that transformation lay power. It's also important to remember that ancient people were not as repelled by strong or unpleasant smells as we are today. In fact, many scents we would consider foul, burned hair, tar, or even certain animal secretions, were considered potent, mystical, or protective. Perfume was not about smelling like flowers, but about carrying meaning, warding off evil, or attracting divine favor. Imagine for a moment a Roman temple at dusk. The air is thick with incense, heavy resins glowing on coals. Priests toss in powders of herbs, then a lock of hair from a deceased loved one. The smoke curls upward, pungent and strange, carrying prayers to Jupiter. In that moment, the line between perfume and ritual vanishes. The scent is not worn on the skin, it is worn on the soul. This is the unsettling beauty of perfume made from ashes. It reminds us that fragrance has always been more than a luxury. It has been a way to mark transitions, to honor the dead, to touch the divine. And while we might recoil at the idea of burning hair or grinding bones into powder, for ancient people, these were acts of devotion. The smoke, no matter how strange it smelled, was perfume in its purest form, a bridge between worlds. In the story Our Ashes and Hair as Perfume, we see one of the most haunting truths of fragrance history: that scent has never been bound by beauty alone. Sometimes it was born from sorrow, from transformation, from the strange idea that even what is lost can rise again as smoke. Section 6. Tar, Pitch, and the Perfume of Smoke-Filled Streets. When we picture perfume, we imagine delicate bottles of floral essences, light sprays of citrus, or perhaps the soft glow of amber notes lingering in the air. But in the past, perfumes were often heavier, darker, and stranger. Few were stranger than the use of tar, pitch, and thick resins, substances that clung not just to the skin, but to entire cities. These were the scents that filled the streets, the public baths, and sometimes the bodies of the people themselves. Today, we'd find them suffocating. Back then, they were a part of life, and in many cases, considered strangely attractive. Tar and pitch are sticky, black substances drawn from trees or created through slow-burning processes. To us, they smell sharp, smoky, and industrial, more like roadwork than romance. But for the Romans and Greeks, pitch was more than a building material. It was also a perfume base, a cleanser, and even a medicine. In fact, some Roman recipes for scented oils involved mixing resins with small amounts of pitch, creating a fragrance that clung tightly to the body. It was heavy, resinous, almost suffocating, but it carried associations of strength, vitality, and even healing. One Roman author, Pliny the Elder, describes pitch as having a penetrating aroma that purifies the air. In crowded cities where the stench of sweat, waste, and decay was a daily reality, anything that masked odor was welcome. Pitch was especially valued in the baths. The heat of the caldarium released its pungent scent, blending with oils and herbs rubbed on the skin. Imagine walking into a Roman bathhouse, steam clouding the air, echoes of voices bouncing off marble walls, and everywhere the smell of pitch. Dense, smoky, almost bitter, but to them, refreshing. The use of tar as a personal scent also appeared in colder regions of the Roman Empire. Soldiers stationed in the north, far from the luxuries of imported spices, sometimes used pine tar as a crude perfume. It wasn't about smelling sweet. It was about survival. Tar repelled insects, kept away lice, and had antibacterial qualities. To wear tar was to create a protective shield. In this sense, perfume was less about seduction and more about practicality. A soldier in Germania might smear a tar mixture on his body, not to charm, but to endure. The Greeks, too, embraced smoky perfumes, though theirs leaned more toward resins. Substances like styrax, frankincense, and myrrh were prized for their thick, balsamic aroma. Burned on altars, they filled temples with a heavy, sacred perfume. But they weren't only for the gods. Mixed with oils, resins were worn on the skin, rubbed into the hair, or added to wine as flavoring. To modern noses, these resins might smell medicinal, sticky, overpowering. To the ancients, they carried warmth, depth, and prestige. Perhaps the most curious aspect of this was the way entire cities carried these scents. In Rome, public festivals often involved the burning of enormous amounts of incense and pitch. The air would be so thick with smoke that it clung to clothing and skin for days afterward. To walk through the city was to be perfumed by fire itself. The perfume was not chosen individually. It was communal, imposed by the atmosphere, a shared scent that united citizens in the experience of ritual. But the strangeness doesn't end there. Some sources suggest that pitch and tar were used as erotic perfumes in certain contexts. The dark, heavy scent was linked to fire, heat, and passion. Lovers might burn small sticks of pitchy wood in their chambers, believing the smoke aroused desire. While we might laugh at the idea of tar as an aphrodisiac, it makes sense in a symbolic way. The fire that burned pitch was intense and consuming, just like passion itself. There is also evidence of medical perfumes made from tar and resins. Roman doctors recommended inhaling the smoke of burning pitch for lung ailments or applying tar oil mixtures to wounds. Here, perfume blurred the line between medicine and fragrance. The scent of tar was harsh, yes, but it was thought to heal, to cleanse, to protect against corruption. In a world where disease spread easily, these associations carried weight. Let's pause for a moment and imagine the sensory world of an ancient Roman street. The air is thick with smells: bread baking, animals being led to market, sweat, refuse, and smoke from burning braziers. Over it all hangs the tang of pitch, used to waterproof ships, seal amphorae, and perfume the baths. For us, the smell would be choking, overpowering. But for them, it was life. It was the scent of commerce, of protection, of shared ritual. In its own way, it was perfume. Even stranger, some of these smoky perfumes survived into medieval and even early modern Europe. Tar waters, pitch oils, and resin-based balms were sold as tonics. They were used to ward off the plague, to cleanse the air of miasma, and to anoint the sick. For centuries, people believed that these heavy, smoky smells drove away corruption and evil. What we would wrinkle our noses at, they leaned into as comfort. Why did people embrace such pungent substances as perfume? The answer lies in how differently they understood fragrance. For us, perfume is cosmetic, an enhancement of beauty. For them, it was symbolic, medicinal, protective, divine. A strong scent was not a flaw, it was a feature. It showed power, endurance, and connection to forces greater than the individual. So while tar and pitch might seem like the last substances anyone would want to wear as perfume, in the ancient world, they made perfect sense. They masked the harsher odors of daily life, they protected the body, and they symbolized transformation by fire. Perfume was not just about smelling nice, it was about surviving, thriving, and finding meaning in a smoky world. Section 7. Animal fat and the strange grease of perfume. When we think of perfume today, we picture sparkling sprays that float gently in the air, light and ethereal. We forget that perfumes, for most of history, were not airy mists, but thick ointments and balms rubbed into the skin, sticky and heavy. And what was the foundation of those ointments? Not elegant alcohol or delicate distillations, but animal fat, the rendered grease of sheep, goats, pigs, and even more exotic animals. This was the hidden, slightly unsettling base of many ancient perfumes. In places like ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, oils were precious, but not always available in abundance. Olive oil was used when it could be spared, but it was costly, and not everyone could afford it for daily perfuming. Instead, rendered animal fat was often used to absorb and carry fragrances. The process was simple, though strange to imagine. Fat was melted down, purified, and then infused with flowers, herbs, or resins. Once cooled, it formed a soft, fragrant balm. It was thick, waxy, and long-lasting. On the skin, it lingered for hours, even in hot climates. To the people of the time, this was luxurious. To us, the idea of rubbing scented grease onto our bodies feels almost grotesque. The Egyptians perfected this method. Archaeologists have discovered cones of perfumed fat placed on the heads of the wealthy. In banquets, these cones would slowly melt in the heat, releasing fragrance that trickled down into the hair and onto the skin. Imagine dining in a grand Egyptian hall, with music playing, dancers moving gracefully, and all around you the smell of lotus, myrrh, and cinnamon, released not by sprays, but by cones of animal fat melting gently under the lamps. It was perfume and spectacle combined, a slow ritual of fragrance that transformed the body into a vessel of scent. But there was a hidden truth behind this elegance. The fat came from animals slaughtered for food and sacrifice. Sheep, cattle, and pigs all gave not just meat, but also grease that could be rendered for cosmetics. Nothing was wasted. In this way, perfume was tied to survival. The same animals that fed the people also perfumed them. Wearing a balm of scented fat was, in some ways, carrying the life of another creature with you, an intimate and slightly unsettling connection. The Greeks adopted this practice, though they preferred lighter oils when possible. Still, fat-based unguents were common. They were used by athletes, rubbed on before and after exercise, sometimes mixed with herbs thought to restore strength. The word unguent itself comes from this practice of smoothing grease onto the body. It was both practical and perfumed, both protective and pleasurable. For them, Grease wasn't strange, it was essential. In Rome, the scale grew larger. Roman bath culture demanded constant oiling of the body. After bathing, Romans applied perfumed unguents to soften the skin and leave behind pleasant aromas. Wealthy citizens might use olive oil, but cheaper blends often relied on animal fat. To stretch the scent further, perfumers mixed in strong resins, frankincense, myrrh, and storax, that clung tightly to the fatty base. These scents were intense, powerful, sometimes overwhelming. But in a crowded, bustling city filled with strong odors, intensity was exactly what was needed. Some Roman authors actually criticized this reliance on fat-based perfumes. Seneca, the philosopher, wrote with disdain about men glistening with ointments, their bodies coated in greasy balms that clung too heavily to the senses. Yet for many, this was the very point. Perfume was meant to be noticed. A fat-based unguent didn't just waft, it endured, marking the wearer long after they had passed. There were even stranger variations. Some records hint at the use of goose fat, prized for its softness, or even exotic animal fats imported at great cost. The more unusual the base, the more luxurious the balm. There are tales, half rumor, half fact, of perfumes made with dolphin fat or even bear grease. These were extreme luxuries, the kind of concoctions reserved for the wealthiest elite, who sought novelty in every detail of their lives. The idea of animal fat as perfume base wasn't just practical, it carried symbolism. Fat was life-giving, nourishing, and enduring. To anoint oneself with fat was to absorb those qualities. In religious contexts, fat was sacred, offered to the gods in sacrifice, burned on altars as a gift. Wearing it on the skin blurred the line between sacred offering and personal adornment. Perfume, once again, was not simply cosmetic, it was deeply cultural, even spiritual. The texture of these perfumes was very different from what we know today. Imagine rubbing a balm into your arms and neck. It is thick, waxy, almost buttery. At first, it feels heavy, but as it warms with your body, it melts, releasing waves of scent. In hot weather, it softens further, mixing with sweat, creating an even stronger aroma. It does not disappear quickly. It lingers, hour after hour, a constant companion. In some cases, even clothing carried the scent long after it was worn. Of course, not everyone enjoyed these greasy perfumes. Some found them cloying, even offensive. Satirists in Rome joked about people sliding around on couches during banquets, their skin shining with ointments. Others mocked the sheer excess, claiming that entire fortunes could be wasted on scented balms. Yet despite criticism, the practice never faded. Fat remained a foundation of perfumery well into the medieval period, until distillation and alcohol-based perfumes gradually replaced it. It is strange, perhaps, to realize that much of our perfume history is built not on flowers or elegance, but on fat. Behind the delicate notes of rose and cinnamon was the unglamorous labor of rendering grease. Behind the beauty of the banquet hall was the quiet, unspoken truth that perfume came from the same animals that fed and clothed the people. It was at once practical and symbolic, grotesque and beautiful. And so, animal fat stands as one of the strangest perfume bases in history, a reminder that what we now separate as beauty and necessity were once deeply intertwined. To wear fat as perfume was not odd to them. It was a way of connecting with the cycles of life, of survival, and of scent itself. Section 8. The Civet Cat's Secret, Musk in a Bottle. If perfumes made from animal fat seem strange, the story of civet musk may sound even more unsettling. For centuries, one of the most prized ingredients in perfumery came not from flowers or resins, but from the scent glands of a small, shy animal, the civet cat. The civet is not truly a cat, though it looks feline. It is a nocturnal mammal, living in Africa and Asia, with spotted fur and a long, slender body. But what made it valuable was not its beauty or its fur, but the strong smelling secretion it produced. The civet's perineal glands, located beneath its tail, created a thick, paste-like substance used to mark territory. Fresh from the animal, this substance smelled pungent, fecal, and overwhelmingly musky. To the untrained nose, it might even be nauseating. Yet, like ambergris, civet musk transformed with time. When aged, diluted, and blended, it became warm, sweet, and deeply animalic, an aroma that added richness and sensuality to perfumes. In the right hands, what was once foul became exquisite. The earliest uses of civet musk trace back to Ethiopia and the Arabian Peninsula, where traders learned of its potency. By the Middle Ages, civet had spread across the Islamic world and into Europe. In Arab perfumery, civet was valued for its strength. It could anchor lighter floral oils and make them last longer on the skin. In Europe, it quickly became a mark of luxury. To wear civet was to display wealth and refinement, for it was rare and expensive. Only the upper classes could afford such animalic splendor. The process of collecting civet musk was, however, disturbing. Civets were often kept in captivity, and their glands were scraped or pressed to extract the secretion. Sometimes, the animals were restrained, while keepers carefully collected the paste with a spoon or blade. This could be done once a week, ensuring a steady supply. Historical records tell of civet houses in Ethiopia, India, and later in France, where animals were bred specifically for perfume. To modern readers, this practice feels cruel, but at the time it was seen as simply another way to harness nature for beauty. Once collected, the musk was aged in sealed containers. Over time, its harsh odor softened. Blenders would then dilute it with alcohol or oils, creating a scent that was warm, leathery, almost sweet, with an undeniable sensual depth. Perfumers found that just a trace of civet could transform a fragrance, adding body and allure. Without it, many perfumes felt thin and fleeting. With it, they became full, powerful, and unforgettable. Civet became a cornerstone of perfumery during the Renaissance. Nobles dabbed it behind their ears or mixed it with powdered wigs. Ladies carried pomanders, small, perforated balls filled with civet-scented substances to hold to their noses. The smell was intense, but in an age when streets and homes were often foul, such intensity was welcome. Better to smell of civet musk than of sewage or decay. For some, the animalic note even symbolized vitality, a closeness to primal instincts that was thought to stir passion. Writers and poets of the era frequently mentioned civet. Shakespeare used the word civet in his plays, sometimes mockingly, to hint at pretentiousness or excess. To him, civet was both a luxury and a vanity, a sign that people were covering their natural selves with something artificial. And yet, the fact that it appeared in his writing shows how well known it had become, how much it had entered the fabric of daily life for the wealthy. The odd thing about civet musk was its dual nature. It was both repulsive and alluring, both animal and refined. To those who knew its source, it carried a hint of discomfort, a reminder of its origins beneath the tail of a small mammal. Yet, to the wearer, and to those around them, it could smell luxurious, warm, and intoxicating. It blurred the line between disgust and desire, a paradox that gave it a lasting place in perfume history. By the 18th and 19th centuries, civet was being imported in larger quantities. European perfumers used it to create some of the most iconic fragrances of their time. It paired beautifully with floral notes like rose and jasmine, adding depth and sensuality. Without civet, many of these scents would not have lasted so long or carried such presence. It became one of the building blocks of classical perfumery. Of course, not everyone appreciated civet. Some found its intensity overwhelming. Satirists joked about courtiers drowning in animal musk. Doctors warned that it might overstimulate the senses, leading to nervous disorders. Yet, despite criticism, it remained highly prized. Even in the 20th century, traces of civet musk were still being used in famous perfumes, discreetly hidden in their formulas. In modern times, the use of natural civet has mostly disappeared. Concerns about animal welfare, combined with the rise of synthetic alternatives, have made it rare. Scientists have recreated the chemical compounds responsible for civet's unique aroma, allowing perfumers to mimic its warmth without involving animals. These synthetics, though cleaner and more ethical, lack the full complexity of natural civet. Collectors and connoisseurs still insist that nothing matches the depth of the original. The story of civet musk is another reminder of how far humans have gone in their search for beauty. We have scraped glands, boiled fats, and harvested secretions, all to create fleeting moments of fragrance. It may seem bizarre, even grotesque, but it also speaks to a deep truth that perfume has always been about transformation. The foul becomes fragrant. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. Out of the civet's glands came a scent that defined centuries of luxury. And so, civet musk holds its place among history's strangest perfume ingredients. A reminder that perfume is not just about flowers, but about the human willingness to seek beauty in the most unlikely places, even beneath the tail of a small, wild creature. Section 9. The Beaver's Secret, Castoreum in Perfumery. If civet musk seemed unusual, the story of Castoreum may sound even stranger. This substance, highly valued for centuries, comes from the castor sacs of beavers, located near the base of their tails. Just like civet, it was not the animal's appearance or fur that drew attention, but an unexpected and pungent secretion. Beavers, industrious creatures best known for their dams and lodges, produce castoreum to mark territory and communicate with one another. In the wild, it has a sharp, resinous smell, not unlike tar mixed with leather and smoke. It is not a scent most would immediately associate with luxury or beauty. Yet, once again, human creativity transformed the raw material into something prized. The earliest known use of castoreum dates back to ancient medicine. Physicians in Greece and Rome prescribed it as a cure for headaches, fevers, and even seizures. They believed the pungent substance carried powerful properties, capable of shocking the body back into balance. Some even thought that beavers willingly sacrificed their castor sacs when hunted, biting them off and leaving them behind for hunters to collect. Though a myth, this tale only added to the beaver's mystique. By the Middle Ages, castoreum found a new role: perfumery. When carefully treated and aged, the harsh scent softened, revealing warm, leathery, slightly sweet tones. These qualities made it invaluable for perfume makers. Like civet, castoreum served as a fixative, giving fragrances greater depth and longevity. It paired well with woods, spices, and even delicate florals, grounding them with an earthy richness. European perfumers quickly embraced castoreum, and it became a hidden note in many classic compositions. Nobles and aristocrats may not have realized that their elegant fragrances contained a trace of beaver essence, but without it, their perfumes would have seemed flatter and less enduring. The secret of castoreum was always its subtlety. A small drop could completely transform a blend. Beyond perfume, castoreum also lingered in medicine. Apothecaries stocked it in powdered or tinctured form, recommending it for ailments ranging from hysteria to toothaches. In some regions, it was even used in love potions, its musky, animalic scent thought to stir hidden desires. Whether it truly worked or not, the belief in its potency endured for centuries. What is fascinating about castoreum is how it straddled the line between the natural and the refined. On its own, it was harsh, bitter, almost unpleasant. Yet when blended into perfumes, it became warm, enveloping, and strangely comforting. Some described it as leathery, others as smoky, or even reminiscent of new books and fine tobacco. It gave perfume a quiet strength, an invisible backbone. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, castoreum was a common ingredient in perfumery. Some of the most iconic leather and chypre fragrances owed part of their character to this beaver secretion. Its smoky depth helped create scents that were bold, elegant, and lasting. Without castoreum, many of these perfumes would never have achieved their legendary status. Yet, like civet, natural castoreum eventually declined in use. Concerns about animal welfare and changing tastes led perfumers to seek alternatives. Synthetic molecules were developed that could mimic its leathery, smoky aroma. Today, most perfumes that list castoreum as a note use these synthetics, sparing beavers from being farmed or hunted for their scent glands. Still, connoisseurs sometimes speak wistfully of true castoreum. They claim that no laboratory compound can fully replicate its complexity, its strange balance of harshness and warmth. For them, it remains one of nature's oddest and most fascinating gifts to perfumery, a reminder of how deeply humans have searched and how unexpectedly they have found beauty. In the end, castoreum, like ambergris and civet, is part of a long tradition of turning the unusual into the luxurious. It tells us something important about perfume itself, that it is not only about flowers and sweetness, but about depth, mystery, and even a touch of the wild. From beneath the tail of a beaver came a scent that shaped centuries of fragrance. Strange, yes, but undeniably captivating. Section 10. Smoke, Fire, and the Perfume of Burnt Things. When we think of perfume today, we imagine bottles of liquid with floral, citrusy, or woody notes. But long before distillation and the artistry of modern perfumery, scent often began with something far simpler: smoke. In fact, the very word perfume comes from the Latin phrase per fumum, meaning through smoke. In the ancient world, people believed that burning substances released not only fragrance, but also spiritual power. Incense was offered to gods, ancestors, and spirits, carrying prayers upward with the smoke. Yet beyond sacred ritual, there were times when burning the strange and the unexpected gave rise to perfumes unlike anything we might imagine today. One curious example comes from medieval Europe, where apothecaries and perfumers experimented with burnt animal matter. Among the more peculiar ingredients were burnt feathers. Feathers, when set alight, release a sharp, acrid odor, not something most would call pleasant. But when carefully charred, ground, and combined with resins like frankincense or storax, they were said to create a smoky base note that clung to the skin and garments. The scent was not intended to be beautiful in the modern sense, but rather protective. Many believed that smoky, bitter odors kept away disease and evil spirits. The same idea led to the use of burnt leather scraps in some recipes. Leather already had a strong smell from tanning and curing processes, often involving animal fats, smoke, and plant tannins. When these scraps were burned and infused with herbs or oils, they gave off a deep, musky, smoky fragrance. In Renaissance courts, perfumed leather gloves became fashionable, especially in France. What began as a way to cover the harsh odor of tanned hides evolved into an art form. Gloves were scented with mixtures of floral oils, musk, and sometimes smoky essences derived from burnt matter. A pair of fine perfumed gloves could signal wealth, refinement, and even intimacy, since their aroma lingered on the skin of anyone who wore them. Perhaps stranger still were the uses of tar and pitch, derived from burning wood, pine, or other organic matter. These sticky substances carried an intense, resinous smell. Tar was used in medicine as an antiseptic and pain reliever, but in perfumery, it found a niche role in creating smoky, leathery accords. For those living in medieval towns filled with the stench of refuse and disease, the strong odor of tar might not have seemed unpleasant at all. It was simply another layer of sensory reality. Some even thought such scents were cleansing, a harsh but protective armor against foul air. In the Middle East and parts of Asia, smoke-based perfumes took on a more refined form. Bahur in Arabia, for example, involved burning chips of agar wood, oud, mixed with resins, spices, and sometimes unusual additions. The fragrant smoke would fill homes, clothing, and hair, creating a luxurious aura that lingered for hours. Though oud itself was precious, some mixtures included burnt materials that added depth and uniqueness. Plant roots, shells, or animal substances transformed by fire into aromatic ash. These smoky, burnt-based perfumes tell us something essential about the history of fragrance. Beauty was not always defined by sweetness or lightness. A harsh, bitter, or smoky note could be just as valued depending on the cultural meaning attached to it. In a time when bad smells were thought to carry disease, a strong odor was protective. In a courtly setting, a smoky, leathery glove fragrance whispered of sophistication and danger. And in spiritual rituals, the rising smoke was itself the perfume, ephemeral but divine. Modern perfumery has not entirely abandoned this strange heritage. Some niche fragrances today deliberately recreate the smell of smoke, charred wood, or burnt leather. Perfumers use synthetic molecules like cade oil or birch tar to mimic the old smoky notes. These scents are often described as dark, mysterious, or even gothic, appealing to those who want something far removed from the sugary florals of mainstream perfumes. In a way, they pay homage to the past, when people were not afraid to embrace the wild, the strange, and the raw. It is fascinating to think that what was once a byproduct of survival and superstition, burning whatever was at hand to mask odors or to ward off unseen forces, has become an artistic choice in perfumery today. From burnt feathers to tar, From smoking leather to perfumed ashes, humans have always experimented with fire and scent, finding beauty in places where others might only smell destruction. Perfume, at its core, is transformation. And what could be more transformative than fire itself, turning the ordinary into smoke, the ugly into fragrance, and the ephemeral into something almost eternal? Section 11. The most unsettling perfumes: sweat, blood, and body secretions. When we think of perfume today, the last thing that comes to mind is anything derived from the human body. Modern scents are designed to be clean, pleasant, and almost ethereal. Yet in the past, some of the most prized fragrances included ingredients that would make most people shiver. These were not merely practical scents. They were ritualistic, symbolic, and deeply tied to beliefs about vitality, power, and desire. One of the most fascinating ingredients was sweat. In some ancient cultures, especially in Roman and medieval Europe, perfumers valued the armpit sweat of young or particularly healthy men. It was believed to contain life force, strength, and virility. Priests and physicians even recommended it in small amounts for aphrodisiacs or health tonics. Perfume makers would soak rags in the collected sweat, then steep them in oils and resins to create a scented mixture. The resulting aroma was heavy, earthy, and animalic, but in a way that people of the time found alluring rather than repulsive. Blood was another ingredient used in the world of scent, though less often. In certain tribal and religious practices, animal blood, sometimes mixed with herbs and flowers, was burned or preserved as part of a ritual perfume. The smoke and fumes were thought to carry spiritual potency. It was believed that blood contained life essence, and using it in scent could transfer vitality or protection to the wearer. In some cases, human blood, even just drops, was incorporated into sacred perfumes during ceremonial rites. These perfumes were not for casual use, but were symbols of devotion, transformation, or connection with higher powers. The idea of bodily secretions as perfume extended beyond blood and sweat. Semen, saliva, and other fluids were occasionally noted in historical texts as ingredients in magical or ritualistic concoctions. While these uses were highly restricted and often secret, they highlight a recurring human theme: a desire to capture the essence of life itself in a fragrant form. Perfume was not just about pleasant smell. It was about power, vitality, and influence. Some of the most unusual perfumery practices were tied to love potions and aphrodisiacs. In certain European alchemical texts, perfumers blended dried menstrual blood, sweat, or other secretions with oils and powdered herbs. The resulting mixtures were worn on the body or applied to clothing in the belief that they would inspire desire, strengthen attraction, or even compel affection. To modern readers, this seems shocking, but in a pre-scientific era, the idea of a scent carrying life force or intention was completely natural. Animal secretions also played a role in these extreme perfumes. Beaver castoreum, civet musk, and even the musk of deer or badgers were sometimes combined with human-derived materials to create perfumes of extraordinary power. These were heavy, lingering, and unmistakably animalic, scents that reminded the wearer of nature, vitality, and raw life. Such perfumes were not subtle. They were designed to be noticed, to dominate the senses, and to leave an impression that was both physical and spiritual. Interestingly, some Renaissance and Baroque perfumers sought to balance these pungent ingredients with lighter aromas. Rose, jasmine, orange blossom, and other floral notes were blended into mixtures containing sweat or musk. The goal was to mask the more intense rawness while still retaining the underlying power of the animal or human essence. The result was a perfume that could smell pleasant, floral, or even delicate at first, but which would reveal a deeper, stronger scent hours later. It was the olfactory equivalent of layering music, sweet melodies, over a profound, almost primal rhythm. Medical practitioners of the time often encouraged these unusual perfumes. They were thought to strengthen the body, prevent illness, or stimulate the mind. The idea was that strong, concentrated scents could influence the humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and thereby restore balance. While it is unlikely that sweat or blood had any real medicinal effect, the belief in their power was strong, and these perfumes were often expensive and highly sought after by the elite. It is also worth noting that the smell of human bodily fluids was not universally considered unpleasant in the past. Cultural norms were very different. What we might instinctively recoil from was, in the right context, an intimate, prized, and potent scent. Royalty and wealthy patrons would pay great sums to acquire perfumes containing rare animal or human-derived materials. It was as much about status as it was about fragrance. To wear such a perfume was to display wealth, daring, and even secret knowledge. Perfume historians note that these scents also served practical purposes. Many were applied during long journeys or in crowded cities. Their heavy, pungent nature could mask less pleasant odors. In a time when daily bathing was infrequent and streets carried the scent of waste, perfumes derived from strong animal or human substances could be a welcome shield against the ordinary stench of life. Today, the use of human secretions in perfumery has largely disappeared, replaced by synthetics and ethical alternatives. Yet the story remains fascinating. It reminds us that perfume has always been about more than simple beauty. From sweat to blood to musk, humans have sought to capture life's essence in scent, exploring boundaries that would astonish us today. In conclusion, perfumes made from bodily fluids occupy one of the most bizarre chapters in fragrance history. They are uncomfortable to think about now, yet they reveal a culture of curiosity, symbolism, and the quest for intimacy with the natural and spiritual world. The idea that a scent could carry life, power, or desire shows just how deeply humans have always connected smell with identity, emotion, and even magic. Section 12. Exotic plants, wrought, and rare resins. Nature's oddest perfumes. While animal and human secretions provided the most unusual scents in perfume history, plants and resins offered their own strange surprises. Some of the most highly valued perfumes were derived not from fresh flowers or sweet herbs, but from rotting, resinous, or otherwise unexpected plant materials. These were often sourced from distant lands, carried along long trade routes, and treasured by royalty and the wealthy. One of the most remarkable of these ingredients was mastic, a resin collected from the mastic tree on the Greek island of Chios. It oozes naturally from the bark and hardens into tiny tears, which are then ground into powders or dissolved in oils. While fresh mastic smells lightly sweet and piney, aged or heated resin can take on a slightly smoky, almost earthy aroma, giving perfumes a deep, enduring base. Merchants prized it not only for its scent, but for its supposed medicinal properties, which included soothing the throat, aiding digestion, and purifying the air. Equally fascinating was styrax, a resin harvested from shrubs in Asia and Africa. Styrax was often mixed with other fragrant materials to create complex perfume bases. When freshly collected, it smells balsamic, warm, and resinous, almost like a combination of vanilla and tree sap. But older or poorly stored styrax could develop sour, slightly rotting notes, adding a strange, dark character to the perfume. Alchemists and perfumers valued these aged scents for the depth and mystery they brought, proving that beauty was not always about freshness. Another curious substance was orris root, derived from the iris plant. Once dried and aged for several years, orris root develops a violet-like scent. But in its early stages, it has a musty, earthy smell, almost like damp soil. Perfumers learned to combine it with floral oils and musk to balance its unusual aroma. Today, orris root remains a prized ingredient in fine perfumery, a reminder that even a humble, rotting root can transform into something luxurious with patience and knowledge. Some perfumes were created using rotting flowers or herbs. Certain blossoms, when fermented or partially decayed, emitted rich, complex scents that were thought to embody life cycles, decay, and renewal. In parts of the Middle East and South Asia, perfumers would intentionally allow petals to wilt, then infuse them in oils to extract a deep, layered fragrance. These smells were heavier, more animalic, and far from the airy floral notes we expect today. Yet for those who understood their nuance, they represented earthiness, sensuality, and mystery. Frankincense and myrrh, the famous gifts of the Magi, also contributed to this strange palette. When burned or dissolved, they release smoky, resinous scents, sometimes bitter or acrid. Their aroma is simultaneously spiritual and corporeal, filling temples and homes with a scent that is both intoxicating and grounding. Perfumers blended these resins with other exotic materials, from sandalwood to amber, creating complex perfumes that could linger for days. In some cases, even spoiled or fermented resins were used deliberately, their pungency valued for its powerful, long-lasting projection. Beyond resins and plants, perfumers experimented with other unusual botanical substances. Civetine flowers, dried roots, and tropical leaves were imported at great expense. Some had strong, unpleasant odors on their own, but when combined with animal musk, oils, or alcohol, they produced subtle undertones that enhanced and extended the fragrance. Trade routes spanning Africa, India, and Arabia made these exotic materials rare and expensive. Owning perfumes containing them became a sign of status, wealth, and worldly knowledge. Even in Europe, unusual plant scents made their mark. Renaissance perfumers explored rotted orange peels, fermented herbs, and even vinegar-infused floral extracts. While vinegar sounds unappealing today, it acted as a preservative and carrier for fragrant compounds, allowing delicate scents to remain stable for longer periods. These ingredients created a layered, complex perfume that changed over time as it mingled with the wearer's skin and body chemistry. It was not static. It evolved, revealing different facets over hours or days. The preparation of these exotic perfumes required skill, patience, and knowledge of chemistry long before the science existed. Perfume makers needed to know how to balance sharp, sour, or decaying notes with sweetness, warmth, and softness. A poorly balanced blend could smell simply rotten or overwhelming, but a masterful combination would produce something mesmerizing, profound, and intoxicating. It was an art form that combined creativity, science, and intuition. One of the most striking lessons from this history is that our modern sense of beauty is highly selective. Many of the scents that we now consider repulsive were once the height of sophistication and luxury. Rot, decay, and pungency were carefully harnessed, transformed, and elevated into experiences of elegance. Perfume history shows that humans have always been willing to explore the limits of smell, discovering fascination, allure, and even comfort in the most unexpected places. Thus, perfumes from exotic plants, rotting materials, and rare resins stand as a testament to human ingenuity. They remind us that fragrance is about depth, complexity, and surprise, not just sweetness or freshness. For centuries, people delighted in the strange, the pungent, and the unusual, finding beauty where we might only see decay. These scents are history's proof that creativity knows no boundaries, and that even the most unlikely ingredients can become objects of desire and wonder. Section 13. Fermented, pungent, and animalic perfumes, a courtly obsession. While flowers and resins often dominated the world of historical perfumes, some of the most coveted and unusual scents came from fermented, pungent, and animalic mixtures. These blends were prized by nobles and royalty, admired not only for their aroma, but also for the prestige, mystery, and power they conveyed. One of the key ingredients in these perfumes was fermented honey. Honey on its own is sweet and fragrant, but when left to ferment, it develops a rich, slightly sour aroma. This aged honey was combined with oils, resins, and spices to create perfumes that were deep, heavy, and long-lasting. Its sour-sweet character added complexity and warmth, making it particularly suitable for courtly perfumes that needed to linger on skin, hair, and clothing for hours. Animal products also played a major role. Civet musk, castoreum from beavers, and ambergris were common in these formulations, while pungent alone, when expertly blended with fermented plant materials, these animalic notes created a profound and luxurious depth. In many ancient courts, the combination of fermented plant matter and animalic secretions was considered the height of sophistication. It signaled wealth, taste, and daring, a willingness to embrace the unusual and the powerful. Fermented fruits were another fascinating component. Citrus peels, figs, and dates, when left to age or ferment, gave off tangy, almost sour odors that could be used to enhance the richness of a perfume. Combined with musk or resins, these fermented fruits added a lively complexity that transformed the fragrance from merely sweet to full-bodied and intriguing. Some aristocrats even requested perfumes that smelled slightly earthy or animalic, as it was associated with vitality and natural strength. Historical records from the Renaissance and Baroque periods describe perfumes made from fermented petals and herbs. Roses, violets, and lavender were sometimes allowed to wilt, ferment slightly, and then macerate in oils. The resulting aroma was heavy, slightly musky, and profoundly layered. It was considered an advanced skill to balance the sour and pungent notes with sweetness and warmth, and perfumers who mastered this art were highly respected. Their blends were not casual scents. They were statements of power, refinement, and exotic knowledge. Some of the most extreme animalic perfumes combined several pungent ingredients at once. Imagine a mix of civet, castoreum, fermented honey, aged resins, and slightly rotting plant matter. On its own, each component could be overwhelming, but a skilled perfumer could balance the notes to produce something rich, captivating, and oddly comforting. Courtly nobles delighted in such fragrances, as they were unique and could be tailored to the wearer. The perfume became a signature, a personal aura that others would immediately recognize. These complex scents were also believed to have mysterious powers. In some cultures, it was thought that animalic and fermented perfumes could enhance attractiveness, stimulate desire, or even influence emotions. In medieval Europe, noblemen and women sometimes used these fragrances in chambers or during social gatherings to impress or subtly manipulate. The aroma carried with it a sense of authority, vitality, and sensual sophistication. Interestingly, some historical perfumers experimented with fermented and slightly spoiled fish or other seafood. Though this may sound revolting today, small, controlled amounts were used to create a marine or ozonic undertone in certain elite blends. In coastal regions and ports, these fragrances were celebrated as the scent evoked the sea, commerce, and distant lands. It reminded wearers and onlookers of travel, exoticism, and worldly refinement. Even alcohol played a critical role in these perfumes. Wines and spirits were sometimes used as carriers for fermented ingredients, helping to preserve their scent while enhancing their projection and longevity. Alcohol could soften harsh notes, making pungent, fermented materials more palatable and blending them seamlessly with sweet or floral components. A well-crafted alcoholic base allowed the perfume to evolve over hours, gradually revealing layers of scent that changed and deepened. One of the most remarkable aspects of these perfumes is their intentional complexity. Unlike modern fragrances, which often aim for instant pleasantness, historical fermented and animalic perfumes were designed to unfold over time. The wearer might notice one note first, then another hours later, each shift telling a subtle story. It was a reflection of the wearer's refinement, patience, and appreciation for the intricate interplay of smell. These extraordinary scents remind us that perfume is not just a cosmetic accessory. It is an art, a science, and even a psychological tool. From fermented honey to civet and castoreum, each unusual ingredient contributed to a rich tapestry of aroma, signaling wealth, sophistication, and daring. The pungent, fermented, and animalic perfumes of history challenge modern assumptions about beauty, proving that what we now consider bizarre was once highly coveted. In conclusion, the fermented, pungent, and animalic perfumes of history were not mere curiosities. They were masterpieces of smell, carefully balanced, culturally significant, and deeply desired. Their strange origins and surprising combinations reveal a human desire to explore boundaries, embrace complexity, and transform the raw materials of life into lasting elegance. They are a testament to our ancestors' creativity, audacity, and enduring fascination with fragrance. Section 14. Alchemy, Synthetics, and the Most Unusual Perfume Experiments. Perfume has always been a blend of art and science. In the past, before modern chemistry, alchemists and early perfumers experimented with unusual combinations of natural and man-made substances. Their goal was often to create long-lasting, powerful, and entirely unique scents, some of which would surprise, delight, or even unsettle anyone who encountered them. One of the most remarkable trends in historical perfumery was the creation of synthetic fragrances using chemical processes. While the word synthetic sounds modern, early alchemists had already discovered that by feeding, distilling, or fermenting materials in unusual ways, they could create smells that did not exist in nature. Some of these early experiments produced smoky, bitter, or metallic scents that were considered luxurious and mysterious. Alchemists often experimented with metal salts, mineral extracts, and rare ores. Substances such as alum, iron filings, or powdered tin were sometimes dissolved in alcohol or oils to enhance fragrance longevity or to alter the scent profile. These materials were not chosen for their inherent beauty, but for their ability to change the character of other ingredients. A trace of mineral might add a metallic sharpness or a dry, dusty quality that balanced sweetness and musk. Perfume enthusiasts of the time found these contrasts intriguing, as they gave a fragrance a complex, evolving quality. Another unusual technique involved smoke infusion. Alchemists would burn resins, woods, and even herbs in a controlled way and pass the resulting smoke through oils or alcohol. The smoke carried volatile aromatic compounds which were absorbed into the liquid and preserved. This allowed the creation of perfumes with depth, smokiness, and a subtle chemical edge that natural distillation could not achieve. Some of these scents were highly sought after by royalty, who wanted fragrances that were mysterious, unusual, and unlike anything found in gardens or forests. Early synthetic perfumes also included the use of fermented or putrefied materials, but treated in a precise manner. Alchemists discovered that partial fermentation or chemical alteration could transform foul odors into something earthy, warm, and unexpectedly pleasant. By combining these altered substances with flowers, resins, and musk, perfumers created blends that were both bizarre and captivating. The ability to tame and transform something unpleasant into luxury was seen as almost magical. A particularly interesting experiment involved combining sulfur compounds with oils and resins. Sulfur has a sharp, pungent odor in its natural state, yet, when properly blended, it could give a perfume a bright, electrifying note that made the fragrance energetic and memorable. Some alchemical recipes suggest adding tiny amounts of sulfur-treated materials to musks or ambergris, creating perfumes with unusual longevity and projection. These creations were not for everyone. They required a palate for the unusual and a willingness to embrace something outside conventional beauty. Other alchemists experimented with plant acids and fermentations, creating scents that evolved over time in the bottle. For instance, a mixture of citrus peels, fermented herbs, and aged resins could gradually shift from sour and tangy to sweet, musky, and smoky. These time-based transformations made perfume a living, changing art, something dynamic rather than static. Nobles and wealthy patrons appreciated this quality as it made their fragrance unique and unpredictable. Some perfumers even dabbled in early aromatic chemistry using ammonia or urine derivatives. While it sounds shocking today, these substances were believed to stabilize the scent or amplify certain notes. When carefully controlled, they contributed warmth, depth, and longevity to perfumes, particularly those containing musks or animalic elements. Once again, what might seem disgusting to modern sensibilities was considered a mark of sophistication and technical mastery. Alchemy in perfume also led to experiments with layering extremes, blending very sweet, floral extracts with pungent, fermented, or mineral notes. The resulting fragrances were multidimensional, with top notes that were immediately appealing, heart notes that revealed complexity, and bass notes that lingered for hours, rich, deep, and sometimes startling. Patrons of these perfumes often valued them precisely for their strangeness, seeing them as a display of refinement, wealth, and daring innovation. In conclusion, the world of alchemical and early synthetic perfumes shows how human creativity in fragrance was never limited to pleasant flowers or fruits. From metal salts to smoke infusions, fermented and transformed materials, and even early chemical curiosities, perfumers pushed boundaries in search of novelty, longevity, and expressive depth. These unusual creations remind us that perfume has always been about exploration, transformation, and the ability to find beauty in the unexpected. Alchemy in perfume history is not just a curiosity. It is a window into human ingenuity and imagination. It shows that even hundreds of years ago, people were challenging conventions, experimenting boldly, and embracing complexity. The strange, pungent, fermented, or chemically altered perfumes of the past are a testament to the lengths humans will go to capture the elusive magic of scent. Section 15. The most extravagant and bizarre perfumes in history. Throughout history, perfumes were far more than simple fragrances. They were symbols of status, power, and wealth, and in some cases, they were so rare and unusual that only the richest could afford them. Some of the most extravagant perfumes combined ingredients from across continents, from exotic resins and flowers to rare animal secretions, creating scents that were as fascinating as they were unexpected. In Renaissance Europe, perfumes became a sign of luxury and sophistication. Noble families commissioned perfumers to create unique scents that would set them apart. Some bottles contained dozens of different materials, each sourced from distant lands. For instance, rose oils might come from Bulgaria, while jasmine arrived from India, ambergris from the ocean, civet from Africa, musk from Asia, and even powdered pearls or gold were carefully blended. These perfumes were potent, layered, and highly prized, filling rooms with complex aromas that lingered for hours. Wearing such a perfume was not simply about smelling good. It was about displaying power, refinement, and access to the rarest materials in the world. One of the most unusual ingredients in historical perfumes was ambergris, a waxy substance from the digestive system of sperm whales. In its raw form, ambergris smells strong and pungent, but after aging and careful processing, it becomes sweet, musky, and almost ethereal. Perfume makers combined it with floral and resinous oils to create fragrances that were luxurious, intoxicating, and extremely rare. Royals and elites prized ambergris not only for its scent, but for the skill required to transform it into perfume. In the Middle East, the use of oud, or agar wood, became synonymous with prestige. Oud is a fragrant resin from a particular type of tree, and it is extremely rare. Its aroma is dark, smoky, and slightly sweet, with deep earthy undertones. Some of the most extravagant perfumes contained oud mixed with rose, saffron, sandalwood, and other rare oils. These combinations were meant to impress, signal wealth, and even influence emotions, creating a powerful olfactory presence. Oud perfumes were not simply about smell. They were experiences, intended to be savored slowly, with each note revealing itself over time. Animalic ingredients were also used in some of the most extraordinary perfumes. Civet, derived from the glands of the civet cat, was considered a potent and alluring material. When combined with ambergris, musk, and floral oils, it created a fragrance that was intensely layered. While the idea of animal-derived perfume may seem unusual today, Historical users found it deeply sophisticated. These scents could project authority, sensuality, or even mystery. A well-blended animalic perfume was seen as a sign of refinement and daring. Perfumes sometimes included fermented or aged ingredients to add depth. Fermented honey, decayed flowers, and aged resins provided notes that could shift over time. A fragrance might start as floral and sweet, then gradually reveal a warm, musky, or slightly earthy undertone. Perfume makers of the past were aware that these evolving scents added complexity and intrigue. Wearing such a perfume meant presenting oneself as someone who appreciated nuance, patience, and artistry. Some historical perfumes also included metallic or mineral components. Alchemists experimented with salts, powdered metals, and mineral extracts to stabilize scents, extend longevity, or add subtle sharpness. When used carefully, these materials enhanced the fragrance without overpowering it. The result was a perfume that could linger for hours, evolving as it interacted with the wearer's body chemistry. Such perfumes were extremely difficult to create, making them symbols of skill and luxury. Perfume in history was often tied to ceremonial and social use. Royals and nobles used extravagant scents during banquets, processions, and celebrations. Perfumes were also used in private chambers, where the scent could influence mood, provide comfort, or inspire attraction. Some perfumes were even used in diplomacy, gifted between rulers as symbols of friendship and respect. A single bottle of perfume could carry immense cultural and social significance, far beyond its fragrance. One of the most remarkable aspects of these historical perfumes is their unpredictability and richness. Each ingredient, from fermented resins to rare flowers, contributed a unique layer. The perfumes unfolded over hours, revealing new facets and changing subtly with temperature, humidity, and the wearer's skin. This dynamic quality meant that a perfume was never static. It was alive, evolving, and deeply personal. Wearing such a fragrance was a way of expressing individuality, taste, and refinement. Even today, historical records of these perfumes fascinate us. They remind us that fragrance has long been an art form, a science, and a symbol of culture. The extravagant and bizarre perfumes of history show that humans have always been willing to explore boundaries, combine the unexpected, and transform raw materials into something extraordinary. These scents, now long lost, carry stories of wealth, daring, and olfactory creativity. And now, as our journey through the strange, luxurious, and sometimes bizarre world of historical perfumes comes to an end, it is time to slowly let your mind rest. Imagine the delicate scents, the smoky resins, the rare flowers, and the mysterious animalic notes gently drifting through the air. Feel the calmness of centuries of history settling around you like a soft blanket. Take a deep breath. Let go of any tension. Let the strange and wonderful perfumes of the past fade into a gentle memory, leaving only peace and curiosity behind. Soon your mind will drift, carrying you softly into sleep, filled with the quiet wonder of history's most fascinating scents. Good night, and may your dreams be as rich and intriguing as the perfumes of the past.